Hi, everyone. How are you all doing today? Yeah? Good? So my name is Nikki, and as you've heard, I run a restaurant in London called MaziMas. And this restaurant serves the food from migrant and refugee women from all over the world. Now, merci. Now, to tell you about MaziMas, to tell you about the story of MaziMas, I really have to start with my own story. I'm the daughter of immigrants on both sides of my family. My father is German, and my mother is Greek-American. And as you might be able to tell from my accent, I grew up in New York City. And when I was young, I was cared for by my Greek godmother. My godmother was also an immigrant in the US. She moved to the US from Greece with her family in the 1970s. And she loved living in the US, but she had quite a restricted life there. She couldn't find work. She had limited education, she didn't speak English fluently, she had children at home to take care of. And then, as also now, employers didn't really like hiring immigrants. But she was an amazing cook and baker, and for years she'd had this dream of opening her own bakery. But her husband was a very traditional Greek man, and he said to her, "No way. There's absolutely no way you're opening a bakery. Business is for men, and women stay home and take care of children." So it never happened, and that's her greatest regret in life. Now, my godmother told me this story 6 or 7 years ago, and it really struck me because, first of all, because she means so much to me, but also because this is a woman with very few regrets. She's a deeply religious woman, and she's gone through a world war and a military occupation, and that has given her tremendous strength and also a real sense of gratitude for life. So she doesn't have many regrets. And at the time she told me this story, I had just moved to London to do a master's. And because I was new there, and I didn't really know anyone, I decided that I was going to start volunteering in kitchens, in what we call soup kitchens, so cooking meals for the needy. And in those kitchens, I met a lot of women, a lot of migrant and refugee women who reminded me of my godmother. They had very similar stories to hers. These were, again, really talented cooks. And they were there because, like me, they wanted to meet new people. Also, they wanted to practice their English. They wanted to get out of the house and be part of their new communities. But above all, because they couldn't find work. One of the first women I met volunteering was a woman called Maria. Maria, at the time that I met her, had been unemployed for 8 years. She had moved to London 10 years earlier with her husband. She'd married an Englishman, which is what brought her to London. And shortly after they got married, she got pregnant. And when her son was born, she decided that she was going to stay home and take care of him. And she reasoned that, she'd had a good job back home. She was fairly well educated, and so, it wouldn't be too difficult for her to get a job after he went to school. What she quickly realized when her son went to school and she started looking for jobs was that it was going to be very difficult for her to find work. And as I've said, by the time I met her, she had been unemployed for 8 years, and that wasn't because she wasn't trying. She'd applied for loads of jobs over the years, but she'd been rejected from all of them. Now, to give you some context for this, unemployment among migrant and refugee women is very high in the UK. It's higher than it is for migrant and refugee men, and it's also higher than it is for UK-born women. And there are many reasons for this, and you can probably fill in the blanks. But one of the big reasons, one that really stands out, is because a lot of migrant and refugee women have children. And having a child, being responsible for childcare, that makes it very hard to get a job. And that's first of all because you're far less flexible if you have a child to take care of. It's also because if you don't have a secure job before you become pregnant, then you probably won't have a job to go back to afterwards. And so there's a lot of unemployment. And of course, it's that much more difficult for migrant and refugee women, many of whom don't necessarily speak English fluently. They don't have professional networks to rely on. And also, and this is actually the most important factor, they don't have a recent work history often. And that's really important because one of the biggest reasons employers are reluctant to hire new people is because they don't have recent work experience. And of course, that disproportionately disadvantages migrant and refugee women, as it does new arrivals in general, because they don't have a recent employment history in the country. And you can imagine that the longer you don't have a job, the more difficult it is to get a job. And so migrant and refugee women end up stuck in this vicious cycle of long-term unemployment that's very hard to break. And that's exactly where Maria found herself. And it drove me crazy, because this was an amazing woman. This was the kind of woman that everybody wants to be around. She really lit up a room. She was warm, she was funny, she was capable, she was a really talented cook. And as I got to know her better, I thought to myself, why on earth doesn't this woman have a job? I mean, she's got all the qualities that you would think employers are looking for in employees. The problem clearly wasn't that she was unqualified. It wasn't that she didn't have skills. It was that there weren't any opportunities out there for her. And as I spoke to Roberta, as we got to know each other better, I started thinking, how do we create opportunities for these women? And then I thought to myself, these women are amazing cooks. Couldn't they be great chefs? I mean, we pay a lot of people to cook, right? So why not them? And it occurred to me that if we all got together, we could open a restaurant. We could open a restaurant that served their food from their countries. And I think the really special thing about this restaurant would be that it was the food that people are cooking at home, which is not something that you get in a lot of restaurants. Excuse me. So that's what we did. 4 years ago, we started a pop-up restaurant, and that means that we don't have a permanent base yet. We move around from location to location. And what this gave these women, what this gave Maria, was a job. And that's really important, because with a job, you have an independent income. You have money of your own. And for many of these women, that was the first time ever that they'd had an income of their own. And when you're talking about women, this is really important. Because without an independent income, when women are reliant financially on their partners, it's very hard to leave an abusive relationship. And of course, it's very hard to make really any independent choices about your life. But of course, having a job has lots of other positive effects. It makes your confidence go up. It gives you somewhere to be outside the home. It gives you a social network. And it really cultivates pride in yourself and self-esteem. And of course, it enables you to provide more and better opportunities for your children. So this isn't just affecting women, it's also affecting their families and their communities. But for me, the most valuable aspect of what we do at MaziMas is that MaziMas enables women to feel valued. It enables them to feel like they belong to the society in which they're living. And a lot of immigrants these days, they don't feel that. They don't feel valued. They don't feel like they belong. One of our chefs said to me recently that MaziMas makes her feel like she has a place in the world. And actually, my favorite moment over the past 4 years, the moment that I really felt most proud of the work that we do at MaziMas, was quite a small one. It was when Maria's son came into the restaurant one evening to have dinner. And at the time, we were in a space that had a big open kitchen. So he was sitting there and he could watch his mother cook. And he just had this huge smile on his face. He was just beaming from ear to ear. He was so proud of her. And I think that moment meant more to Maria than any money ever will. Now, these things, they may seem trivial, they may seem insignificant. But I think that if we look at the long-term health of society, if we think about the long term, these are really important things. Feeling valued, feeling like you belong somewhere, that's really important. Because when people feel alienated, when they feel marginalized, when they feel like nobody cares about them, that has major consequences down the road. And I think we're seeing some of those consequences now. I think the reason that MaziMas works, the reason that it really is changing people's lives, is that we embrace diversity. We embrace difference. Instead of saying, well, you know, there aren't really any opportunities out there for you, and therefore you're not employable, we're saying, hey, let's create opportunities that fit you. Let's look at the skills that people do have instead of focusing on what they don't have. I think that if we want diversity to work for us, if we really want it to be a positive strength for society, then we need to be creating opportunities that accommodate difference. And we need to be actively creating those opportunities. And that's not an easy thing to do. It really isn't. It requires a lot of creative thinking, a lot of listening to people, a lot of problem solving, and a lot of hard work. But I think in the long term, it's the smart thing to do. And I don't mean that just from a financial perspective, although there definitely is that. I think that this fosters the kind of society that I think we all want to live in. A society in which everyone has the chance to live up to their potential, where everyone can really thrive, and where everyone has an opportunity to use their talents to build a better world. So, I want to leave you with a challenge. What can you do? What are your skills? And how can you use those skills to help other people? How can you specifically, how can you help build a more positive economy? Because everyone can. All of us in this room, we have a part to play. Everyone has the perfect mix of skills for something. And you just haven't created it yet. Thank you.